Hello. In this unit, I would like to speak with you about the work of Frank Gehry. He's an architect based in LA and with global practice with projects on every continent. One of the most accomplished and recognized architects of our time. The project that I would like to speak with you about is the Bilbao Museum in Spain. It is a project that has a before and after in architecture. The Bilbao project, known also for the Bilbao effect, had an incredible impact on the city of Bilbao. Bilbao was known as a harbor and city of steel industry, but it was in strong decay in the 90s. The project, the Guggenheim Museum, was a way for the city to revitalize itself, to have a new point of attraction, a new stimulus in the city for the economy, for tourism, for the people, and for the image of the city in Spain and also internationally. Before we get to the Bilbao Museum, I would like to tell you about some other projects by Frank Gehry and his methodology. Frank Gehry started by designing small-scale projects as, for example, the guest house that he designed, then his own house. His office was known for designing shopping malls, and then at some point when he designed his own house, his client told him, well, if this is what you like your house, this is the architecture that you should be doing and not the one of the shopping malls that you've been doing for me. And the client encouraged him to pursue this new line and this new approach to design. One of the key projects for Frank Gehry, and which somehow brought him to the scene in Europe, was his project for the Vittra Museum in Valls-Marine. Vittra, the furniture company, which owns most of the patents for modern furniture, is the one who commissioned to architects to design a building on their factory in Valls-Marine, which is near Basel on the German side. Frank Gehry was lucky to be selected for the museum, and this is a project where he was able to explore this complex geometry, complex shape, and initially he built them out of painted them white, and they were covered with stucco and painted white. Afterwards he used this same methodology for design to design other bigger and more complex and more sophisticated buildings. In the time of the Bilbao Museum, the city of Bilbao started a competition for the Guggenheim. Part of the project was sponsored by the Guggenheim Foundation and part of it by the city. For Bilbao, this was a way to relaunch their steel industry and relaunch their economy. Frank Gehry was invited among other architects to participate, and he was given the opportunity to choose a site or to advise the city about the site for this project. There were different sites in consideration, and the one that he chose was right under the highway which enters into the city. So there is this big highway that goes above the level of the houses, and Gehry decided to position his museum next to the river and next to the highway, and part of it would go right under this highway. So we have the tower of the museum that goes on one side, almost like embracing the bridge, this huge bridge, and then the museum is on the other side. This is very strategic on his side because this is the entrance to the city, so anyone who drives into Bilbao from other places in the Basque Country would pass through this bridge, and the first thing they would see is the Guggenheim Museum, which is rather spectacular. On the other side, it allows for views of the project from above. If the project were in any other place, most of the people would only see it from down below, while being in this strategic position, the project is visible from above. There are different ways of accessing the project. People can either walk to the project around the river and then climb the huge staircase and get to the entrance, or they can circle in right above the project on the level of the city, which is on a slightly higher level and access from that side. It's interesting to follow the design process of Frank Gehry and to understand how his intentions and how he designs architecture. He starts with something rather rational. He took the program and he started making it into boxes. So essentially the first phases of the project were only boxes. Then he arranged them around the site and he decided where each part of the building would be. Afterwards, he transformed the boxes into hexagons, and after that into much more complex geometry. So essentially we go, he has this process of going from very rational and functional design to very irrational and sculptural design. He uses paper, as you may have seen, even in the Simpsons movie. You can see him making buildings out of paper, throwing them and saying, hey, this is the building, I found it. So he starts with designing with paper. He curves it, he cuts it, and he molds it into a specific shape. Then he looks at this shape and decides whether some form would be appropriate for this project, and then he develops it further. After this very manual and I would say traditional process, he goes into scanning this, this shape with very sophisticated scanning technology. After that, he passes it to a computer, and with the help of digital technology, he optimizes the shapes. So he passes from the paper to a digital model, then from the digital model back to a physical model, either by building it or 3D printing it. After that, the model could be changed, modified, adapted, and goes through many different phases until he comes up with a project which he finally is happy with. Once that project is ready, starts another big part, which is the construction phase. For a project like Bilbao, it was very difficult to build these complex geometries with the traditional methods. None of the walls is straight, and none of the walls is vertical, so everything inside is curvy, and this complex geometry cannot be controlled by a normal three-dimensional software. So what him and his company had to use is a technology from space aeronautics. So they used the program called CATIA by Dassault Systems, a French company, the same one that Boeing is using for designing commercial airplanes and also for the military airplanes. It's a technology that allows the designer and the engineer to have complete control of every single detail and to know absolutely with absolute precision how one surface is going to meet another one, how they're going to intersect, how the beams in general the structure will be connected to the substructure, and then will be connected either to the interior plaster cladding or to the exterior titanium cladding. The project was built out of steel, and as you can see in some of the images, you have this very complex steel mesh which essentially is behind every single wall. Steel was used for this project because Bilbao is known for its ship industry or shipbuilding industry, and also for the steel industry. So it was a material that was available, and also there were skillful builders who could use this technology and adapt it for the building of the Bilbao Museum. The build project has a very spectacular impact, and anyone who goes there is rather shocked when they see this, and when they see this unique shapes, geometries, sculptural forms, and perceive their impact. The sun reflects into the building in a very specific way. Every facade is curved and it's covered with titanium, highly reflective surface, so we can see this reflections of the city, reflection of the sky, reflection of the river in the facade of the building. The sculptural shapes are something that we haven't explored before. We have never been in a building which is almost like a sculpture on a large scale. We have never walked into a sculpture, except maybe for projects like Richard Serra, who has a whole gallery dedicated to himself in this Guggenheim Museum. Maybe Richard Serra, or almost certainly Richard Serra, is one of the inspirations for Gehry, with his inclined surfaces, with deformation of the walls, and also unexpected paths that the visitor takes through the building in order to reach a certain point in a sculpture or in the building. The interior of the building is as spectacular as the exterior. There are places that really take your breath away. For example, the bridge that is right above the lobby and that connects one part of the building with the galleries with another one, in which we walk through this very thin glazed bridge on the sides, and we see the huge void that's right underneath. This idea of the union of sculpture and architecture, it's not unique. There has been attempts to do it ever since the Renaissance, Baroque architecture, Rococo, so there has always been this presence of highly sculptural effect on architecture. At that time, many of the architects were actually sculptors, like Bernini, Borromini, just to mention a few of the Baroque architects, or Michelangelo and Brunelleschi from the Renaissance. In the case of Frank Gehry, the building is very successful in terms of the impact it has on the visitors. It is less successful in terms of the space that it provides for the paintings, because the space of the architecture completely overpowers the paintings that are inside. Most people don't go to the gallery to see the artworks. Most people just go to see the building, and as it happens in a project like this, you could as well enjoy the building if it were empty than when it's filled with artwork. On the other side, and the most important, I would say, effect of this project has been for the city of Bilbao itself. Bilbao afterwards has multiplied many times the amount of tourists that go see it. The whole economy is booming, and it achieved this good moment of development and of coming back to the international scene, and is back on the map of world architecture, thanks to the Bilbao Museum. I would say that there are many other projects by Frank Gehry that are worth exploring, and you can find some of them here in New York. There's the IAC building, which is an office building in the Chelsea area, right near the High Line. There is also the Spruce Tower near the Brooklyn Bridge, and there's also the new Performing Arts Center, which is currently under construction at Ground Zero. So I invite you to look further into the work of Frank Gehry and to discuss with me and your peers his work and in the questions that are below this chapter.